Oh, my timing there was perfect, Chase. I got you just as you were taking a mouthful of tea.
Oh, really? Perfect.
Awesome, Chase. Thank you so much for joining me today. We've been chatting for a couple of months or so now, and you're currently building Pool. What is Pool?
Pool is a platform that simplifies the ability to manage pooled funds. So the ability to collect, manage, track, and distribute any kind of pooled funds. So whether that's competitions, so prize pools for competitions like poker tournaments or hackathons, or managing event sponsorships for anyone that's managing conferences, all the way to artists and entrepreneurs that are looking for creative ways to finance their projects without giving up all of the equity in themselves.
Okay. And so when you say, what are the potential applications for this? If you're looking for creative ways to finance projects, how else can this be applied?
I think the vision really is to be able to have multiple verticals that we can address. But the way that it really started was my last company, Ava. My co-founder and I started that about 8 years ago. And long story short, we went through the traditional VC route, raised 5 million from VCs, angels, also through debt financing. And we essentially shot ourselves in the foot. We thought that was the holy grail. Everyone kept on telling us that's the way to put rocket fuel into the engine. But then essentially what ended up happening was we onboarded one investor specifically that kind of derailed us, presented themselves as founder friendly. But as soon as the check closed or the round closed, he ended up replacing the CEO, which is my partner, and then pushing me out of the company. I specifically remember this and will never forget. He told me, there's no room for vision in this company. We just got to be heads down and execute, which there's truth to some of that. But when you lose sight of vision, he ended up firing the entire existing team, killing the culture, sucking all the confidence out of the founders, and then driving the company to the ground. And fast forward a year later, he ended up having a heart attack and ended up leaving the company. And so that the investor that brought him on as part of a package deal, I decided to not put in a second tranche of money. Therefore, we lost the company. So,
wow.
Yeah.
If that's not some kind of cosmic retribution, I don't know what is.
That's right. Karma's a bitch, as they say.
Karma's a bitch indeed. Yeah. So Paul is your second company. Ava was the first one. What was Ava?
Ava was essentially an IoT company, Internet of Things. We made smart indoor gardens as our first product that automatically grow all sorts of different herbs, vegetables, and healing plant right in the comfort of your home. And it worked like an espresso machine. So you pick what you want to grow, comes in these like pre-seeded capsules. You plop it into the machine and it lights it, it waters it. It has a camera and some sensors that calibrate the environment, and it makes it essentially intuitive and easy to grow at home and to have a transparent way of knowing what goes into your body.
Super interesting. So when was this? How many years ago was this?
We started it about 8 years ago. We ran it until I'd say September, October of last year. Although, the unwinding, so to speak, started happening about 2 years ago.
So how has your perception of how you're operating as an entrepreneur changed in those past 8 years? You mentioned that everyone was telling you that this is the fuel for the fire, as it were. You need to go the VC route, the debt financing route. This is the way to do it. From what you've said, that doesn't sound like it was the case. How has your perception changed? What was that journey like?
Oh,
a big question.
Really, yeah. No, it's a beautiful question because there's so many different facets to it. I think to be able to answer it, I would kind of create a general list of pros and cons. Anyone listening, I think, it can absolutely be an instrumental tool to grow your company, to be able to hire staff, enter new markets, innovate, et cetera, et cetera. But there are very real cons to it as well. So obviously venture capital and angel investing, are time honored routes for startups seeking, financial capital to scale their operations or whatever it is. And it could also be a door to get strategic guidance from mentors and people that have kind of been there, done that, and tap into new expansive networks. So that the pros, those are the pros, and the credibility and validation also by being like, oh, I got funding from XYZ, A16Z literally, or whoever, if it's YC is YC. But the cons in my eyes now far outweigh the pros. So one of the major cons is the equity dilution. So founders typically give up a significant portion of ownership, specifically around the pre-seed round, where that dilution can be a significant amount, and it can essentially derail or demotivate founders if they don't see a path to kind of regaining their sovereignty. Of course, you'd rather own a smaller piece of a bigger pie, but at the same time, when you lose control and ownership, and investors can be incredibly demanding, right? So they'll take a board seat or gain significant decision-making power. And that could potentially lead to conflicts over the company's direction, which is definitely the case for us. And
where do you think those conflicts stem from? Is that from an incentive misalignment? Where does that come from?
Oh, I think, again, multiple facets. It could be incentive misalignment, but for us, it was values misalignment. So, of course, we wanted to grow a company and potentially get it to an exit. This one was it really felt good. The team felt like a family, and the culture was amazing up until we accepted this dude and his money. And so I think from a values perspective, where we valued, growth, innovation, being able to treat people the way that we want to be treated, all that kind of it sounds blue sky, airy fairy, but we really embodied that. And these people came in from military backgrounds, and and I guess they were very old school in the way that they were approaching investing and operating a business.
So you went the very traditional route by the sounds of things. You've got these ex-military individuals who are getting involved. They're bringing their way of doing things. The culture of the company, very different to that. What was that experience like as a young founder, as a first-time rounder, going out and raising and then finding yourself in rooms with these individuals?
What we were hoping for and what we were, advised from other board members and, the team, the internal team itself, as well as our fellow founders, was that, it doesn't hurt to take advice from people that are, senior or more experienced. And we would be stupid to not, at least not entertain it. And, if you're a founder, you're generally, I would imagine, open-minded and open-hearted, and you're there to make an impact and change. So we took those meetings and really, really started leaning into those conversations. And I think what we did, or what I did, that I take full ownership of, is I started putting these people on a pedestal. So I started taking their wisdom and sage advice as gospel almost. And, it would result in flip-flopping direction or important decisions that, dictate the direction of the company. And yeah, it created this idea of pursuing different opportunities. And, the age-old advice of, he who chases two birds will catch neither, I think rings really true there. So I think it's important to be open to feedback and new ideas, but don't be a paper bag in the wind, basically. Stick to your own intuition and bends when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I've spoken with a lot of founders who've echoed a similar sentiment. Depending on the nature of the investor that you're engaging with, if they're a big name, that name carries an awful lot of weight, right? You may end up forgetting that it's ultimately still a person that you're dealing with, and you have an outcome in mind as well. Based on those interactions, you're looking to get something from those interactions as well. And I think it's very easy to forget that, especially if you've been raising for a long time, I imagine. I mean, was it a quick process for you? Was it an easy process to fundraise?
No, I think seldom, is it an easy and quick process, especially for first time founders. And so for us, it took about, 6 to 8 months to close our check. We ran through, a handful, several different pitch competitions in the Bay Area, as well as here in Vancouver and Toronto. And it took us across the world to places out in Asia. And it was arduous. It took away from us being in the business. So it really slowed things down on that, on the operational front and actually growing our company. And, for my partner, who is my partner in life as well, it put a lot of strain and stress on our relationship. So at times it felt like I was going to lose it all, but that's also a common theme among founders. The risk tolerance is relatively much higher than the average person. So there's a fine line between, an adrenaline seeker satiating his or her, desire for the thrill versus what's actually scary and fear inducing and anxiety inducing.
The blurring of the line is not always easy to identify. I think sometimes it's a slow creep and you end up a little bit further past it than you anticipated, but you're okay with it. And whoever's around you maybe isn't quite so okay with it in the same way.
Right.
Oh, so with the experience then, like you see, paint me a picture. You've gone through this 6 to 8 months of fundraising. You've closed your check. What's that experience like? You've been validated, right? You've got some external capital. And where are you at this stage personally?
Yeah. Well, I think it is important to mention it was multiple rounds. Each round definitely took anywhere between 3 to 8 months. And, we started with friends and family. Then we moved on to kind of like a pre-seed round and then officially did like a seed and seed 2. So at each stage, it felt incredibly exciting in that, there's a new capital injection. We're able to be fully resourced to kind of execute on at least, the next milestone as part of the bigger vision. So, for hardware businesses, especially, right, it's so capital intensive that we were able to finally, take our design and manufacturing from in-house to outsourced. And it was able to get us in the room with some of the bigger players like Foxconn and Flextronics, who manufacture Apple products and some of the household names that you hear today. And so I think being able to be resourced and have the ability to enter the big leagues, so to speak, I think was really cool. It also put us in front of, a wider audience of, new investors, partners, and gave us a lot of credibility to go and hire more senior team members. With that being said, I think there was an incredible heaviness from as part of like the responsibility that's bestowed on someone that entrusts you with millions of dollars. And so I think it's a double-edged sword on that front, because for someone that values freedom and independence and autonomy, spending more time on freaking investor updates and impressing the right people that are on your board, I think became much more a distraction and was all consuming rather than liberating. So at one point in the business, I felt like I was just a robot, and I gave up a significant chunk of the project, and that also didn't feel great. So when you lose, almost majority ownership, that means you lose a lot of control. And if you have a vision, it's important to define the what and the why of what your organization is doing and the mission. But at some point with these investors that are, bloodhounds for profit, it can easily misdirect you in thinking much more short term.
Yeah. I imagine that was rather challenging. It's something that you built, something that you care deeply about. What were the first signs that things were not necessarily going in the direction that you had initially hoped for?
Well, the big one was when the investor presented himself as founder friendly. And one of the first things he did after closing the deal was he suggested that we replace the CEO, my partner, and get a full like senior management team in place. And at the time, we were quite junior, and I think that kind of move is fair. It's something, especially if it's like for the greater good, right? For the betterment of the company, to have better strategic direction for the employees, better ways to like streamline process and operations, for sure. We're totally in for that. But when he comes in with that, right, that was a huge red flag. We're like, how is that founder friendly? And he subsequently, made it and basically an ultimatum for him to release the second tranche to hit like these unrealistic goals, which we in fact hit. We hit them all. And we thought like these are outrageous and crazy, and they have nothing to do with actually, growing and scaling the company. But we're more like tests. They felt like tests for his ego. And yeah, I say all this and I sound, bitter, which there is some resentment, but I actually have come out the other side incredibly grateful for having that opportunity. So, for any founders that are looking to raise money, I wish that they were just more aware of the pitfalls of what could go wrong. And just to be in full clarity and transparency around that, because then they can make a decision for themselves, whether it's right for them or not. But my approach today would look quite different.
Mm-hmm. So if you were doing it today in that similar vein, you mentioned right at the start of the conversation, there are alternatives. What would you suggest that founders look at from where you are today with the knowledge and experience that you have?
Yeah, I think especially in the early days, it's super important to preserve equity and control, as well as being sovereign in the flexibility and creativity of how you can grow your project or launch and grow your project. So there are absolutely alternative methods to financing, and I think you are always in a better position when you have revenue, ideally recurring revenue, that you can organically grow, or that has been organically growing, right? So word of mouth referrals for the products and services that you offer are one of the best indications of number one, product market fit, as well as being able to be confident in what you have. So really focusing on that, positioning yourself as uniquely different from existing solutions, nailing your target demographics so that you know exactly who you're after, understanding the underlying psyche about how they make those decisions, what their motivations and fears are, will arm you with a much, much better vantage point, as well as the leverage you need to then go and raise financing, equity financing or debt or other creative methods later on. So the approach shouldn't be, hey, I have this idea, let's go out and raise funds. That's almost a surefire way of prolonging your launch, maybe even killing your launch, because that will take up so much of your time and you're going to be running circles with all these different potential investors and partners giving you different advice. Whereas if you know you have a path to revenue, you have a clear business. And so that's cash flow is king for sure.
Mm-hmm. So coming out to market with a product that is generating revenue gives you that little bit more leverage when you are then looking for external capital, I imagine.
Yeah.
More leverage, you can dictate the terms a bit. This is something that already works. What's in it for me, as opposed to this is an idea that I've got that I need a little bit more help finishing up.
For sure. And you know this well in the crypto space, especially how many made it through this bear market from the last bull run?
Few, if any.
Very few.
It's I mean, crypto is an interesting one as well. I think everyone has a very distorted view of how easy it is to find product market fit, for one,
Yeah.
because if you build a product in a bull market, you just have to mention it a couple of times on Twitter and you're going to get some degree of adoption, right? You can go and shout in a loud room and someone's going to come and start using your product. And also because there is just so much capital flowing around in that kind of environment. Fundraising is also relatively easy. So you've got two artificial scenarios in which you are cutting your teeth and then all of a sudden the ground falls out from underneath you because interest rates have gone up. So money costs money again, for one, and the bottom of the market has fallen out. Very few, if any, have survived that kind of shock to the system, as it were.
No kidding. Yeah. And much of that was stemmed from not having a sound business model, not having existing revenue streams. It just seemed like a cool, fad, trendy type of, not even a business, it's like a project. So all these NFT collections, all these like DeFi protocols that didn't really have, built-in scalability or a sustainable model around it. They just went away and lost people, some of them, their shirts. So now there's the trust aspect of it, right? That's completely out the window. So how do you build a brand that, sustains the test of time, that has foundations set that you can build off of? Mm-hmm. So those are the things that I think founders should think about first, and then worry about the bells and whistles and the accolades and acclaim later.
Mm-hmm. I think that's quite a good segue into what you're building now, Chase. So we started off with mention of pools. I think pool is a great example of, one, alternative financing methods, and two, building something that is actually solving a problem. So could you give us a rundown?
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, Pool provides kind of an intuitive and simple way to allow various stakeholders that are looking to collect, manage, track, and distribute funds with ease and efficiency. That's the goal. And so specific use cases would be, for example, like event sponsorships for event managers that can use Pool to collect sponsorship funds from multiple sponsors, track the different contributions in real time, and then distribute the proceeds to vendors or partners involved in the event. So it would include covering costs like venue, rental, catering, and marketing, etc. And so the benefit there is to really simplify the financial management of sponsorship funds and ensuring transparency and streamlining payments to service providers. So that can be applied to many, many different industries and vertical use cases. So for example, poker tournament prize pools, right? Or esport tournaments or sports competitions. We've also talked to different like athlete agencies, right? That need to manage endorsements. So those are kind of like very few use cases. Others could be artists and creators who want to offer more of like a revenue share / profit split type of deal rather than giving, selling their soul, so to speak, to a label. And what's interesting is we see this like TikTokification, if you want to call it that, of content and being able to get eyeballs and viewership. So really it decentralizes and gives power back to the individuals and the creators, to be able to own their own, creation process and distribution of their gifts, right? And to be able to put it out into the world without, giving up sometimes 80 to 95% of their rev. So really, if you think about the ethos of Web3, which is to give power back to the individuals rather than have it centralized, the ability to have something like Pool, which the best analogy I can give is kind of like a Venmo meets GoFundMe, really gives the empowerment and sense of ownership back to people that are not from, that are not hedge fund managers and people that are like the vultures of the industry. So that's kind of the goal of what we hope to accomplish, which is like anything from the people even collecting rent as students, right? Pooling in and, taking away that awkwardness of like needing to follow up with the individual and be like, hey, like, did you pay your rent this month? I have to pay it out of my own pocket, or I put it on my credit card and my dad's going to kill me, all the way to like one day, hopefully, especially with the tokenization of investment funds, being able to process all of the fund pooling on a platform like Pool, I think.
So Pool is the evolution. So when I first spoke to you a couple of months ago, we were initially talking about Pick'em, and Pick'em was more niche in terms of the application. What was that application, and how did you come across that problem?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, interesting segue. Pick'em essentially was a way so Pick'em was a company essentially where we wanted to change the game for good. And what game is that? It was actually sports betting and gambling as a whole. So my co-founder at Pick'em is a professional sports book or bookie, you would call it. He's been owning it. He's owned and operated his own sports book for the better half of like a decade. And he's also a professional poker player. He's got, a bracelet at the World Series of Poker and is quite accomplished in that regard. And we were thinking about all these different ways to like fund our company. And of course, when you're talking to people that are, poker players, you're like, why don't we just bankroll it ourselves? So he actually taught me the game and I fell in love with the game. And we were able to bankroll, at least the initial starting phases of that company. And I was like, oh, wow, this is such a different way to finance, right? Why don't more people do this? And obviously, there's a huge downside to poker as well. You can lose it all as well as gain a lot, which I later found out. But essentially, what we want to do is change the game of sports betting for good. So we were offering the best possible odds available online. So we called them Pick'em lines, as well as we're building a platform with different automated bots that could essentially take all of the historical data on sports games and events and provide a customized strategy for the user based off of their risk tolerance and betting style. And so we were using machine learning, as well as a bunch of different tools to streamline and automate that process so that they can just sit back and enjoy the game rather than being all in it. And so we were building a platform on Polygon for its scalability and, efficiency of fees and time of transaction. And, we were also creating this marketplace of NFTs that were essentially like memorabilia. So if you were to be able to bet on Michael Jordan's rookie year, or like Kobe scoring 81 against the Raptors, that's technically, that holds a lot of value. So similar to how Dapper Labs is creating and has done, a lot of success with NBA Top Shots, we were following that same model. What we ran into was, we were running all sorts of different poker and sports type of events around the world at different, piggybacking off of crypto events. And at one point I was just sitting there and I was like, am I really passionate about sports betting and gambling? And is this something that I could really dedicate my next chapter to? And for myself, at least, it was a no. And so we decided to transition that to different funding models because we were running into so many poker players and athletes and entrepreneurs that we wanted to back and stake. And so we were looking at all the different ways that we could, create a vehicle that doesn't look like them giving up equity. And so that ultimately led to Pool.
Nice. So one problem that stands out when we've had previous conversations is the poker problem, the funding problem in poker. As I understand it, it's basically a gentleman's agreement between a funder and a player. Someone is bankrolling, someone is staking them, and then that's it. So you built a tool that basically fixes that problem, or can be used to fix that problem, among other things.
Yeah, it is definitely a solution to that. I was so surprised, man. I was like almost appalled that,
I can see that.
Heard the way that like funder. Yeah. was getting funded, it was all, mostly on handshake deals or like WhatsApp, Telegram messages, right? And then they were saying that was legally binding. And, to some extent, maybe it is, but especially around, close friendships and relationships that you want to, deepen and sustain over the long haul, that is absolutely the worst way to go about, doing deals. Of course, it's like, your word can carry a lot of weight, but that may be true for you. It may not be true for everyone. So I've heard of a lot of people, different partnerships dissolving, and not even dissolving, like getting nuked. Or parties were like, I'm never talking to you again. Because when you mix friendship and money without, clarity and transparency, that's a great recipe for disaster. So, what is a way for both parties to be in full agreement in what they're in the partnership or what that relationship could look like? And, what is the exact profit split? What is the time horizon of that investment? What things are they actually covering? Is it like all just buy-ins for tournaments and cash games? Or is it accommodation and food? Because those things add up and look very different. So yeah, it's interesting how ideas evolve from one thing being super specific and niche to how it can evolve into growing into multiple different verticals and serving different communities.
So, I mean, from what you told me, it sounds like you've been on a pretty interesting personal journey from first time founder, going out fundraising, stars in your eyes when you're in the room with these right people, and now fundraising or funding development of a new project through poker. What's that journey been like on a personal level as a founder and to where you've ended up now?
Yeah, I think, quite honestly, I think the way I would do it, if I were to redo it all, is to really focus on personal growth, mental and emotional health. And the biggest piece around that is around self-awareness. So who you are, what gifts do you have, what do you bring what value can you bring to the table? And maybe even more importantly, what your weaknesses and potential blind spots are, and asking for feedback from others on what those are. Because then, and only then, can you truly see yourself from an objective view, and all of the narratives that you might have in your head, all of the preconceived notions and biases, as well as the clear kind of threats to your success. And so if, I've been on a 4 or 5 year journey of like going deep into the psychedelics world, the spiritual, connecting to spirituality a little bit more, and understanding the true nature of who I am. So that has been probably the most profound journey that I've been on, that actually has exponentially been able to increase my level of fulfillment in this process and journey, rather than just focusing on future state, what can be.
And what was the trigger for that journey? You mentioned you've been on this journey for 5 years or so. Ava was 8 years or so ago. There was a trigger in the middle there somewhere. What was that?
I don't think I could relate it just back to, one trigger. I think it's multiple triggers, whether it's, disagreements with my partner or co-founder on roles and responsibilities, unnecessary vying for power in terms of title. And I was enamored by, this hustle culture and, this idea of the CEO having all of the control around vision and direction. But you can have just as much of that as a chief product officer or innovation officer or someone that's heading culture, right? And so interestingly enough, I stopped listening to all of the Gary V's and Grant Cardones of the world, that share incredible wisdom, but also do a lot of barking and telling. And so I moved from that to, more about embodying and showing up with full presence and being softer in my approach. So this idea of like the hero has to be, puff out his chest and be the loudest one in the room. I think I've completely thrown out that notion or ideal of what a leader should look like. And actually, true power to me, is the ability to know thyself, to actually continue to humble yourself and be focused on impact rather than, any individual financial gain or authority. So the definition has been reframed. And as a result, definition of success has been reframed. And as a result, there's much more presence in my life, much more fulfillment and grace rather than this idea of like work 16 hours, come home, sleep, get a little bit of rest. And then you're out, next morning and you got to grind your way and suck it up. Don't be a bitch kind of thing. Right. But no, listen to yourself, listen to what your body needs, listen to what that little voice in your ear is saying, like that cry for help. And then for God's sake, heal your childhood trauma. Cause that shows up in ways that you can't even imagine. That subconscious narrative drives every decision that you make, every partner you bring on, whether in life or in business, every relationship that, you're trying to cultivate is affected by that. So really, I found myself doing a lot of judging and criticizing. And really what that meant was basically putting up a mirror in front of me and showing me that I was being incredibly critical and hard on myself. I didn't have enough self-love. Therefore, it was difficult for me to give the love to others. And I wasn't honest with myself. So how can I be honest with others? So little things you learn along the way,
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a founder, first time or otherwise, who's listening to this, and you were to distill your experience of the past few years down into a couple of takeaway points, as it were, what would they be? Because you've been on a ride, you've done most things that most founders want to do and are now doing something different. How would you recommend they get to where you are that little bit faster?
Oh, first of all, I would not look for shortcuts, because shortcuts are inevitably going to mean that you skip out on much of the foundation work. So I think number one is think long term, be patient with yourself in the process. And one Japanese principle that I think really helped me, which is this concept called ikigai. Have you ever heard of ikigai?
Yeah, I've got the picture in my head. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So it's basically the intersection of what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you're inherently naturally good at. And I would even take that one step further, like what your gifts are. And the idea is that if you can operate from that center, that means that you'll be able to live a life of fulfillment, and your path as an entrepreneur will be much more sustained because you would know exactly what you're meant to be doing. So that idea of purpose distilled down is what ikigai really is. And people of Okinawa, famously known as an island in Japan where people live the longest, people really practice this and embody this. So, I see so many ads on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, what have you. That's like, the short term, like how do we get cash through the door types of businesses, like, drop shipping, marketing agency, along that realm. But more often than not, the people advertising those things haven't really figured out their ikigai. And sure, it could make money, but the reason why they're selling their courses, or whatever is because they probably aren't making as much money doing that, and aren't super passionate. So they're looking for another outlet. And that might not be, the case for all of them, but definitely I've seen those being a lot more prevalent these days. So another thing that would have helped me early on is be really, really, really mindful and careful of who you surround yourself with and what advice that you take, whose advice you take. If they haven't gone through the journey that you are about to go through, take their advice with a grain of salt, and don't be careful of putting people that are older and maybe more experienced than you on a pedestal, because you might lose your own voice in that process. So it just always comes back down to, hey, what is it that you want? How do you define success? Not how, society labels it. And if you can authentically show up as yourself and you are doing things that benefit, it doesn't have to be the world. It doesn't have to change, the entire industry. But if you're doing things that will benefit just two people, that aside from yourself, then you're on a path of impact. So cultivate that and really, really focus on developing your intuition, because that will take you much, much further than anyone else's advice could. So
fantastic. Awesome.
That's in a nutshell.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. If you want to find out more about what you're doing with Pool, where should they go?
Yeah, you can either go to pool.com, or what I would say is better is just go to Twitter and go to Pool Together, and they can find us there. Another way to do it is to look me up on LinkedIn at Chase Ando. And yeah, I'm happy to have any conversations or connect with founders, investors, or anyone that's trying to find themselves in this crazy process called life. So I'm here and always welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chase. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for your candor and for taking me on the journey as well. I feel like I need a beer after that.
Sounds good. Maybe we'll do some mushrooms instead.
Just say the day. Thank you so much, Chase.
Chatting.
And thank you very much, everyone, for listening as well.